Shelby, on the other hand, was anything but relieved. She knew the prince was tall, very tall, just like the king. But the man her father handed her over to towered above her. He glanced down at her, his look serious, as she suspected it would be. But just the sight of that tall frame and handsome face caused Shelby to blush alarmingly. She suddenly asked herself how she could have thought he needed someone to take care of him. He looked as self-possessed as any man could. She thought she might need a chair. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Allen began suddenly, and Shelby forced her mind back to why she was there. The mental effort didn't work for very long. She ended up having a ridiculous conversation with herself. "So he's tall, Shelby. What do you care? At 5'8", you're not exactly short. Okay, so I'm above average, but he's even taller than my father and the king. He must be 6'3" at least." "Marriage is not something to be taken lightly," Pastor Allen said, and Shelby came back to the moment, her face still flaming. "It is to be entered into reverently, with a heart of commitment." Shelby heard the word commitment and felt herself grow calm. She was not unusual. She wanted love and romance as much as the next person. But from the time she gained a peace about marrying the prince, she knew she would be committed to this marriage. It was unconventional and a bit scary. But she had seen something in the king and queen, as well as in the prince's letters, that told her she could honor God in this way. Would the prince be pleased to know she was doing it for that reason? At this point it was hard to say, but Shelby knew her own heart, and that heart was filled with commitment and peace. "Do you, Shelby Lee Parker, take Nikolai Raphael Markham to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Pastor Allen was saying to her. "I do," she said softly, listening as the pastor addressed the man beside her. And then, as Nikolai's deep voice said his own vow without a hint of hesitation, not many minutes later they were husband and wife. Shelby watched as the prince shook Pastor Allen's hand, turned, briefly met her family, and then offered her his arm. The moment Shelby took it, they began to walk from the room. Vaguely aware of her parents and her brother Bryce, she barely caught sight of the king, queen, king regent, queen regent, and even the slightly bent queen mother, all of whom stood on the prince's side of the aisle. Shelby was not completely familiar with the palace. She'd had only one tour. But she knew they were headed back toward the North Quadrant. In seemingly no time at all, they stood in the spacious sitting room, the green sitting room, as Murdoch had called it, that was accessible from both of their bedrooms. Once there, the prince stopped and faced Shelby. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am, yes. Are you all right?" She watched him hesitate. Clearly he hadn't expected her to return the question. He stood looking down at her, making no move to lift her veil. "I believe I am," he said at last. "I wanted to thank you for coming to the palace this way. If there's anything you need, just ask. The staff is most helpful, and will delight to serve you in any way." Shelby watched as he paused, but made herself keep silent. "I wish," he began softly, but stopped. "I'm sorry, I can't." Again she watched him hesitate, his eyes looking like those of a wounded animal. Abruptly he turned and walked away. Shelby followed his progress, even going so far as to lift her veil to watch him. He did not turn back, but when he reached the door, he slipped quietly into the wide hallway. The moment of doubt she'd had in the king's ballroom was long gone. Confident heir or not, it was again utterly clear to her that the prince needed great care.